She stood alone in the center of the glittering ballroom and no one spoke to her. It was not that they did not see her. They saw her perfectly well. They simply chose to pretend she was not there. Lady Alara Blackwood, Duchess of Ashwick, wife of the most powerful duke in the county, stood surrounded by crystal and candlelight, and she had never felt more invisible in her life. Her husband stood 20 feet away. He was speaking to Lady Marguerite, a woman whose laughter floated through the room like rose petals on water. His dark head was bent slightly toward her, his expression unreadable. He did not glance at his wife. He did not even acknowledge her presence. Alara watched the way his lips curved, the smallest shift, a polite smile he never once gave her. Her heart squeezed into a tight, cold knot. She turned her gaze to the floor. She was accustomed to this pain. That was the worst part. Whispers drifted past her like dry leaves. They say he never speaks to her. Married for convenience, of course. She trapped him, you know, after that dreadful scandal. The words burrowed under her skin, but she held her spine straight. She had learned long ago that crying in a ballroom was a luxury a duchess could not afford. The evening dragged on. When the carriages were called, Alexander, the Duke of Ashwick, walked past her without offering his arm. She followed him out into the cold night air, climbed into the carriage opposite him, and sat in absolute silence. He stared out the window. She stared at her gloved hands. The distance between them was not just the velvet seat. It was an ocean neither of them knew how to cross. Back at Ashwick Hall, the grand estate that should have been her home, Alara walked to her chamber alone. She dismissed her maid, sat at her dressing table, and slowly removed her gloves. Her reflection stared back at her. The eyes that looked at her were not sad, they were empty. She had spent 3 years waiting for a word of warmth, a gesture of affection, any sign that the man she married saw her as more than a piece of furniture. Nothing had come. That night she made a quiet decision. She would stop waiting. The next morning the Duke found his breakfast table empty. That was not unusual. She often took meals in her room, but that day she did not appear at all. Not at the morning room, not in the garden, not in the library. He did not think to ask where she had gone. The absence settled into the house like a faint, unnoticed chill. Alara had walked into the village. She had not done so alone before, but she pushed open the heavy iron gate and strode down the lane, her boots crunching on gravel. She found herself at the small, drafty schoolhouse that served the estate children. The teacher, a tired older woman, looked shocked to see the Duchess. Alara simply smiled and asked if she might be of use. By noon, she was sitting on a low stool, helping a little girl trace letters. The child's fingers were sticky with jam. Alara did not mind. For the first time in months, her chest did not ache. Weeks passed. The village began to see their Duchess more and more. She arranged for firewood deliveries to the poorest cottages, sat with elderly tenants, read to those who could not read themselves. She smiled, though the smile was soft and still touched by a deep-rooted sorrow. The people began to love her. They whispered that she was kind, too kind for the cold Duke. They did not know she was building a life out of the ashes of her marriage. At Ashwick Hall, the change was slow but unmistakable. Alara no longer waited for her husband at dinner. She ate early and retreated to her private sitting room. She no longer left small notes on his desk. She no longer asked about his day. The silence in the house grew heavier. Alexander began to notice. He would walk past the empty chair at dinner and feel a strange pull, a discomfort he could not name. He would hear her laugh in the garden, a rare sound but never directed at him. She was not sulking, she was not angry, she was simply elsewhere. One afternoon, he returned from a ride and found a stranger in his library. A tall, lean man with spectacles perched on his nose was bent over a dusty folio. Beside him, Alara was leaning over the same book, her face alight with curiosity. They were speaking in low, animated voices. She laughed. It was a genuine, unguarded laugh that struck Alexander like a blow to the chest. He had never made her laugh like that. She looked up and saw him in the doorway. Her smile faded, not harshly. It simply dissolved into a polite, distant expression. She introduced the visitor as Mr. Julian Cross, a renowned scholar of antiquities who had been commissioned to catalog the Ashwick Library. The Duke nodded curtly, his eyes lingering on the way the man stood a little too close to his wife. A hot, unfamiliar feeling coiled in his stomach. Jealousy. He did not welcome it. Days later, a garden party was held on the estate. Lady Marguerite, ever the elegant viper, cornered Alara near the rose trellis. Her voice dripped honey and venom. "How charming that you have found a companion in Mr. Cross. One must find warmth wherever one can, I suppose, especially when one's husband does not provide it." Alara's cheeks flushed, but she held her tongue. Alexander, standing nearby, heard every word. He saw his wife's embarrassment, saw the way her eyes dropped. And he did nothing. His pride, his confusion, his coldness, all of it rooted him to the spot. He turned and walked away. Alara watched his broad back retreat, and something inside her fractured silently. That evening she did not come down at all. Alexander found himself standing outside her door. He did not knock, he did not know how to reach her. The following morning he encountered her in the corridor. She was dressed for walking, a bonnet in her hand. He cleared his throat. "You have been spending a great deal of time with Mr. Cross." She looked at him, her eyes steady. "Yes, he is an interesting man. He speaks to me." The words were simple, but they cut him deeply. The next weeks were a quiet torment. Alara continued her visits to the village, and Julian Cross was often at the house, always proper, always friendly. The Duke would see them together in the library, heads bent over ancient maps. He would see the way Julian made her smile. That smile, the one she never gave him, became an obsession. He began to linger in hallways, to ask the servants about her day, to watch her from windows. He saw her kindness, her grace, the way she knelt in the dirt to comfort a crying child. He saw her, truly saw her, for the first time, and the weight of what he had lost began to crush him. One rainy night, Julian Cross announced he would soon leave for London. He mentioned, quite innocently, that he had invited the Duchess to a lecture at the Antiquarian Society. Alexander's hand tightened on his wine glass. Later, when they were alone, he confronted her. His voice was low and rough. "I forbid you to go to London with that man." Alara turned from the window. "Forbid me? You have no right to forbid me anything. You have not spoken to me as a wife in 3 years. You do not even see me." His jaw tightened. "I see you now." She gave a small, broken laugh. "Do you? And what do you see, Your Grace? A possession. A piece of furniture you can control when it suits you. I stopped asking for your affection long ago. I will not ask for your permission now." The words hung between them like shattered glass. He reached for her arm. "Alara." She pulled away. Do not pretend to care now. It is too late." She walked out, leaving him alone with the storm beating against the windows. The fear of loss wrapped around Alexander's throat. He had never imagined she would stop loving him. He had assumed her quiet devotion was permanent, that she would always be there, waiting. The emptiness of the house roared in his ears. The following day, his younger sister Charlotte arrived for an unexpected visit. She found her brother in his study, staring at nothing. She was a perceptive woman, and it took her only moments to understand. "You are losing her," she said softly, "and you have no one to blame but yourself." He did not argue, he could not. Charlotte sat across from him. "Do you know why she has been so patient? She told me once in a letter. She believed you married her out of duty after that horrid scandal with her broken engagement. She thought you were trapped, but she loved you, Alexander. She loved you from the start. She waited for you to love her back." He closed his eyes. The pain in his chest was unbearable. "I married her because I loved her," he whispered. "I loved her before the scandal. I watched her from across a ballroom 2 years before any of it happened. She was laughing, her eyes full of light. I knew I would marry no one else. When Percival orchestrated that vile scheme to ruin her family and force her into disgrace, I saw a way to protect her. I could step in, offer marriage, save her from ruin. I thought she would resent me for it. I thought if I told her the truth, she would see me as someone who had taken advantage of her vulnerability. So I said nothing. I kept my distance. I was a coward." Charlotte leaned forward. "Percival, our cousin, what scheme?" Alexander's voice was hollow. He paid off her former fiancé, a weak-willed man, to abandon her publicly at a ball. He spread rumors that her family was bankrupt, that she was morally tainted. He wanted to seize her family's estate through a forced, ruinous loan. I discovered his plot 3 days before the ball. I could have exposed him, but the scandal would have destroyed her regardless. The only way to shield her completely was to marry her myself, to make her a duchess and put her beyond his reach. I thought I was being noble. I was a fool. Charlotte absorbed this in silence. Does she know any of this? No, I could never find the words, and now she is leaving. At that moment, a servant entered with a message. The Duchess had departed for her aunt's estate in the north. She had left a brief note, formal and cold. She needed time, she wrote. Alexander read it with trembling hands. He saw the ink smudged in one corner as if a tear had fallen there. Something broke inside him completely. He rode out within the hour. The journey was long and wet, the roads turning to mud. He did not care. He arrived at the modest manor house drenched and exhausted. The aunt, a kind older woman, let him in with a disapproving look. "She is in the garden," she said. "Do not hurt her further." He found her standing beside an old stone wall, looking out at the gray hills. She did not turn when she heard his footsteps. Her shoulders were set, as if she were bracing for another blow. "Elara," his voice was raw, "please, I need to tell you something I should have told you 3 years ago." She turned slowly. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her face was calm. "What could you possibly say now?" He stepped closer, and for the first time his icy reserve crumbled. His eyes were wet, his hands unsteady. "I have loved you since before you knew my name. I saw you at a ball long before your engagement to another man. You were wearing a blue gown. You laughed, and the sound of it struck me silent. I knew I would never love anyone else. When Percival, my own cousin, plotted to ruin you, I saw my chance to protect you. I married you not out of duty, not out of pity. I married you because the thought of you suffering was more than I could bear. But I was so terrified you would see me as a predator, as someone who used your misfortune to claim you, that I locked my heart away. I thought keeping distance was kindness. I was wrong. I was so terribly wrong." She stared at him, her lips parting. "Percival plotted against me. My former fiancé, he was paid." He nodded. "I have letters, proof. I forced my cousin into exile, but I never told you. I thought it would shame you further. I was a coward, Elara. I kept silent while you withered in a cold house. I did not defend you at that garden party. I watched you slip away, and I did nothing. I do not deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know the truth. I have always loved you." She did not speak for a long moment. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "All this time," she whispered, "I thought I was a burden. I thought you resented me for trapping you. I thought I was unworthy of love." He fell to his knees on the wet grass, his pride shattered into dust. "You are the most worthy person I have ever known. I have been a blind, stubborn fool. I see you now, Elara. I see your kindness, your strength, the way you built a life from the ruins I left you. I cannot undo the years, but I will spend the rest of my life trying, if you can ever trust me again." She looked down at him, the most powerful man in the county, kneeling before her. The pain of years trembled in the air between them, but beneath the pain something else stirred. Hope. Slowly she reached out and touched his cheek. His skin was cold and wet from the rain. He leaned into her hand like a starving man. "I do not know how to stop loving you," she said, her voice breaking. I tried so hard, but you must promise me. No more silence, no more coldness. I cannot survive it again." He caught her hand and pressed it to his lips. "I swear it. Every day I will tell you. I will show you. I will be the husband I should have been." He rose slowly, and for the first time he opened his arms. She stepped into them, her body shaking with sobs. He held her as if she were made of something precious and fragile, and he whispered her name over and over against her hair. The rain began to fall harder, but neither of them moved. They stayed in the garden until the light faded. The aunt watched from the window, a small smile on her face. She ordered the fire to be built up, for she sensed that healing had begun. The return to Ashwick Hall was quiet but not cold. The carriage ride was filled not with silence, but with the small, tentative gestures of two people learning each other anew. He pointed out the village lights. She told him about the children at the school. When they arrived, he helped her down from the carriage and did not let go of her hand. In the weeks that followed, the household witnessed a transformation. The Duke accompanied his Duchess to the village. He sat in the schoolroom and watched her teach, a strange softness on his face. He brought her books from the library, read to her in the evenings by the fire. He spoke of his own fears and failings, and she listened. Slowly, the shadow of those 3 years began to lift. One afternoon, they walked to the old oak tree on the hill, a place she had always loved alone. He stopped her there and took her hands. "I want to marry you again," he said. "Not a renewal of vows, a true wedding, one where I look into your eyes and say the words I should have said the first time, in front of everyone, so there is no doubt ever again that you are my heart." She laughed, a real full laugh, and it was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. "You would endure another ceremony." "I would endure 1,000 ceremonies if it meant seeing you smile like that." The second wedding was small, held in the estate chapel. The villagers crowded the doors, and the Duchess wore a simple dress of pale lavender. The Duke's voice did not waver as he spoke his vows. His eyes never left hers, and when he lifted her veil, the kiss he placed upon her lips was tender and full of promise. Afterward there was a feast, and the great hall rang with laughter. Lady Marguerite was not invited. Julian Cross, who had become a genuine friend to them both, offered a toast to the couple's enduring happiness. He saw the way the Duke looked at his wife and knew his own mild affection would never compare. He bowed out gracefully, content to have witnessed a rare thing, love reclaimed. As the years turned, the story of the Duke and Duchess became a legend in the county. It was said that he never let a day pass without telling her he loved her, that he would brush her hair at night, that he would search the markets for small trinkets just to see her eyes light up, that she, in turn, became the heart of Ashwick Hall, transforming it from a cold fortress into a home of warmth and compassion. But the deepest truth was known only to them. On the wall of her private sitting room she kept a single piece of paper. It was not a love letter. It was the original note Percival had written, the one detailing his scheme, which Alexander had shown her after that day in the garden. She did not keep it out of bitterness. She kept it to remember that sometimes the darkest betrayals can lead to the brightest light. That the man she loved had carried his own silent burden for years, and that they had both been lost, but had found their way home. On cold winter nights, when the wind howled against the windows, the Duke would pull his wife close before the roaring fire. He would bury his face in her hair and whisper, "I loved you too late, but I will love you for all of time." And she would smile, her heart full and healed, and reply, "You were worth the wait." The silence that had once defined them became a thing of the past. In its place grew 1,000 small conversations, a lifetime of shared glances, and a love so steadfast that not even years of pain could erode it. They walked hand in hand, no longer strangers, no longer distant, and the great house, Ashwick Hall, finally became a home.